got back home from Boston last night. I wanted to do a little bit of race recap review of the Boston Marathon I just ran. You've probably heard it was a pretty epic occasion, and it's definitely about the best word I can think of to describe it. It was pretty much nightmare conditions. I ran the 2016 Grandma's Marathon in similarly terrible conditions on the other end of the spectrum, very high humidity and very hot weather, and it's kind of hard to compare those two, apples and oranges, but these were definitely about as bad conditions as I can possibly imagine. The temperatures were in the 30s, low 40s, with wind chills in the teens at the start of the race. With a driving rain, a headwind of 25-35 mile an hour. Pretty much the rain the whole day. It had been raining for I don't know how long, for days. And I was out walking around the day before the race. It started raining. It was raining then, freezing drizzle, and it kept raining throughout the whole day. There was a consistent rain, and then it would come down in sheets when the wind gusts would pick up, and would just feel like someone was throwing a bucket of water on you. It was just really, really crazy. One cool thing that others noticed, so I know I didn't just imagine, is that when one of those wind gusts would pick up, the crowd would actually start cheering louder, like they were like, "Bring it on." So that was pretty cool. I thought maybe I just imagined that in my head when it happened until I saw other people comment on it on Facebook. So must have, either we were all sharing a delusion or that really happened. So that was pretty cool. But I'll back up a little bit and kind of walk you through the weekend. For other reasons, it was even more complicated for me than others. My mom was supposed to fly in Saturday night, and she was flying in from Minneapolis, so they got like 1.5 feet of snow. And so she kept calling me as I was flying out and saying, "Okay, my flight's delayed. I think I'm still going to get out at this time. Oh, it got delayed again. We're on the plane now. We're getting off the plane." And she didn't end up getting in until early Monday morning, sometime like 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't know exactly when it was. I was laying in bed. I didn't really sleep the entire night, and at one point I heard the door open, so I turned over and looked, and I said, "You finally made it, huh?" So she had quite a journey just getting to Boston to be able to make it in time. She thought originally she might not make it until the end of the race, but she did get there in time. I was basically, I was already nervous getting up into the race, heading into the race, and then last Monday is when, a week ago Monday, before the race, the weather forecast turned really bad. Like for a while it was supposed to be a tailwind, and all of a sudden it turned, the wind direction changed, and the weather temperature went down, and it was looking worse and worse. And then I basically went over the edge as far as being anxious and like, "Oh my God, what am I gonna do? How do I dress for this?" That was the big thing. I was like, "Oh my gosh." So before I even left, I started getting some new compression gear and things to be able to withstand those conditions for a full marathon. I've never done anything like that. I've done a half marathon in somewhat similar, close to these conditions, but I knew, being out in this for 3+ hours is not a good thing. So I had gone out and bought some simple compression gear, which was my original plan, just to run in those and some arm sleeves. And then it just kept getting worse and worse. And so after I got to Boston, I was reading everything I could. I went out, I got there, I think about 4 o'clock on Saturday. So I went to the expo, got my bib and that kind of thing, and basically just went to bed for the most part that night. I think that's about all I did. I got my run in too. I had a short run that night. And then the next day I was like, reading up on everything I could to figure out how to dress for this race, because I realized like there are no circumstances under which this is going to be a good time race for me. I'm probably not going to set a PR. So I just kind of adjusted reality and said, my goal is to finish this race no matter what. So I'm going to dress however I need to ensure that happens. If it means I run 15 minutes slower than I want to, that's what I'm going to do, because I'm going to finish this race. So I ended up I went and I hadn't brought a light windbreaker because originally I was just planning to run in arm sleeves and a cut-off compression top and compression shorts. Was my initial plan. So I didn't even actually bring a windbreaker, waterproof windbreaker with me. I don't really even have a good one here to have brought with me. I have one waterproof jacket, but it's not really for running. So I went looking for that, and I went looking for a hat. I had brought a baseball cap, and I had like a knit winter cap. I actually had 2 winter caps with me. I started thinking, man, I should really probably have something that's either waterproof or like really quick drying. So in a panic, I went out and I did find a good windbreaker. So I went out and bought that, and I bought another baseball cap that looked to me a little better than the one I had. I didn't find exactly what I was looking for, but I was like, okay, I'll go with this, and then maybe I can put one of my other hat underneath it that had ear flaps to cover my ears up, and put the baseball cap to keep the water out of my eyes, the rain from driving into my face, you know. And so I got that, and then I ended up doing some grocery shopping to get some random snacks and things like that. And I got back, and then I was reading more about other articles about what they were suggesting to wear for the conditions and stuff, and they started talking about, you know, hand warmers being a good idea, and I read about, using duct tape on your shoes to cover that up to keep the water out as much as you could. So then I was like, okay, I'm gonna go back out and look for these things just because I wanted to be super prepared, you know. So I went out and I found duct tape, and I bought a roll of duct tape, and I bought some hand warmers. After all, I had earlier at Modell's Sporting Goods, they told me, oh, we have these on sale for 99 cents or whatever, and I was like, nah. But then when I read, you know, an article saying that might be a good idea, I thought, you know what, maybe that is a good idea, because I've never run in these kind of conditions for that long. So once again, I just really wanted to be super prepared. So yeah, I went to bed that night. I don't know if I slept at all the whole night. I tossed and turned. My mom came in the middle of the night. I had to get up early to get on the bus and everything. So real bad night's sleep. And I ended up wearing 5 layers on my chest, 4 layers on my legs, 3 layers on my feet and hands, and 2 layers on my head. And I actually had another layer of sweatpants over the top for while I was waiting, but that's not what I ran in. So yeah, I got up early. I was about 1.8 miles from the finish line in the hotel, and I walked there. And, you know, just driving rain. I also had a poncho on top of my jacket to try to stay as warm or dry as I could before the race. So conditions are really, really bad. You know, I'm like, oh my gosh, could this be any worse? I got there, I dropped off my bag. You know, everything went pretty smoothly. Got on the bus, and it was nice to get inside, you know, out of the rain. Up until there, I was still feeling pretty okay. It wasn't really coming down in sheets yet then, so it was still like, maybe this isn't going to be as bad as I thought it might be. And then get to the village, Athletes Village, and the good thing was I got into a porta potty right away, so I got that taken care of first thing. There was barely a line. I got right in. That was awesome. And so then I tried to make my way inside these big tents. And the ground was just like a swamp. Like, it was just soggy mud all around the entrance. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's people. It looked like a refugee camp. It really did. There are people just standing, huddled, you know, wall to wall humanity. There's some people that brought things to sit down, so there's people spread out all over the place, and cold and wet and windy. And so I'm standing there at first. Eventually, the first wave gets called up, so there's a little room, and I find a place to sit down. I had brought my shoes, my running shoes, my racing shoes to change into. So I ended up doing that inside the tent, which in retrospect, I probably should have waited until I got into the corrals. But I changed my shoes there. And then soon enough, that actually went by pretty fast. The drive out there seemed like it took forever on the bus, but that was kind of a good thing to get out of the weather. But yeah, the time actually passed pretty fast in the Athletes Village, and got up to the corrals, and I peeled off the outer layer. And originally, I was planning, I had a hoodie, like a cotton hoodie, nothing to do with running gear, as one of my medium layers, and I had planned to take that off at the beginning of the race, but it was cold and wet and windy enough that I thought, you know what, I think I'm going to keep this on. So I consciously decided to keep that on. In retrospect, I probably could have got away without it. I ended up taking that off about the 10-mile mark, and I also ran most of the race. I had 3 layers of gloves on. I had a couple finger gloves, and then I had actually some ski gloves over the top, because I wanted to make sure I didn't want to, you know, lose a finger or anything like that in those conditions. So I definitely overdressed a little bit, but I don't really regret that, because it's hard to say, like, if I hadn't done that, you know, what kind of condition I would have been at the finish line. But yeah, I think that's one thing I can come from this race. If I ever do run in similar conditions, I can dial it back a little bit, wear a little less. I got completely drenched, as you might expect. If you've seen any pictures or video of the race, if you watch the race, hopefully, it was just a downpour the whole time, driving rain in your face, headwinds. One thing I don't think I'll ever forget is crossing the finish line, and the announcer goes on the loudspeaker and, you know, tongue-in-cheek said, I don't know if you noticed today, but there was a little bit of a headwind out there. So that made me laugh, because you definitely noticed that. But yeah, so I got through, like I said, about 10 miles, and I was starting to feel a little overdressed by then. It was sort of lightly raining at the time, so I took off that hoodie. I took off one of my hats that had ear flaps, and I had the baseball cap over the top of it. Left that at the side of the road. And then, of course, like a mile after that, of course, just driving rain, you know, a downpour, and I'm thinking, oh my God, am I going to regret that? You know, I kept thinking about my ears. My ears were what I was worried about, because, you know, that loses circulation really, really fast. And I run in a lot of really, really cold weather. I've run when it's 30 degrees below zero, so I'm used to that. But what I'm not used to is the rain and the wind, being wet, and you know, hypothermia conditions. And I was worried about hypothermia going into the race. But yeah, then I just kind of, I don't know, I think what happened is I went out a little too fast in those early miles in those conditions. I definitely wasn't going my planned pace at all. I was dialing it back, but I don't think I dialed it back quite enough, because I think my quads wore out a little bit in those early downhill miles. Even though I knew better, I still haven't decided exactly what happened to me. I think that's what happened. It was my quads, because I started doing basically run walk at like mile, I don't know, 14-ish, maybe a little later than that, and that was disheartening. But I was able to finish. I finished, I think my time was like 3:37, which was really disappointing. I was hoping to go like maybe 30 minutes faster than that, in decent conditions. I was really hoping to PR, was hoping to BQ again, and all those things. But mostly I was like, I'm going to get to this finish line, so I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get to the finish line. So that, yeah, that was, it took me a while after the race. It was kind of interesting, because I didn't quite know what to make of it. You know, it took me a few days to kind of think it over, because when I ran that grandma's marathon, that was just a total disaster. I was just mad, and I didn't even want to think about the race. You know, I was just like so frustrated, because I wanted to do so well. This one, I didn't feel like that when I finished. I knew I mean, I was disappointed in my time, and I felt frustrated, and I didn't even want to know what my finishing time was. You know, I didn't want to know where I placed and anything like that. I was just like, I got the medal, I ran the Boston Marathon, I said I was going to do it, I just did it. I'm calling that good enough for today. But yeah, so I don't really have a real negative feeling about the race. I feel proud to have finished, especially in those conditions. And it was definitely a story I'll never forget that day. um, at the same time, I feel like I have unfinished business there, kind of, and so I've been going back and forth thinking about whether I want to try to run this race again. I'd like to have a more triumphant memory of running the Boston Marathon than that, even though it was a triumph just to cross the finish line that day. So I've been kind of thinking it over, like, do I want to try to go back next year and run the risk of, weather like this or a super hot day like Boston Marathon's known for. It's not a great course for running PR times in because of the hills and all that, so and the weather. And so I'm still kind of deciding on that. My plan is to try to BQ for next year and then decide once that happens whether I want to run it again already next year. I kind of feel now like I'm leaning towards yes, that I do want to go back at least once more. If I get another bad weather day, maybe come back once more. We'll see how that happens. But I don't necessarily want to be one of those guys that tries to run Boston every year. It's very expensive. It's not the greatest course in the world for, if you're trying to maximize your time. And I'm at a point in my life where I'm getting older and my days of setting PRs are numbered, certainly. So I would like to, both go and visit new cities when I run and things like that, and also be able to try to get the best PR that I possibly can before I age out. But yeah, right now I'm kind of thinking I'm gonna go back next year, just to try to do better and have a more triumphant experience. But I definitely don't feel negative about it. The crowds were really great. I heard some people, apparently the crowds were much smaller than they normally are, which is completely understandable, but the people that were out there were very supportive. One of my favorite moments was someone telling me that Desi Linden had won the women's race, and that really gave me a morale boost. I live in Michigan, she trains here in Michigan, so felt like a little bit of a hometown hero kind of a situation. And so I was that was very uplifting. I could, I gave a bunch of fives to the Newton girls. I didn't kiss anybody, but it was great. The people who were out there were awesome. I was wearing my Brazil singlet, so there was a lot of support both from runners and people shouting Brazil and stuff like that. So that was really awesome. I got to talk to some fellow runners, Brazilians. And so that was really made it kind of extra special for me, and it was just a great feeling to cross that finish line. The whole race was, it was very surreal. That's another good word, surreal and epic. So yeah, so that's pretty much all I have to say about that. After the race, I was basically hypothermic. I felt warm enough the whole race. I never really felt like, oh my God, I'm cold. So job well done in that aspect of dressing well enough that it didn't stop me from finishing. I felt fine the whole way. When I finished, I could tell something was off because I was still breathing heavily as if I was running and I had stopped. I was walking and I just kept breathing like that. And I was like, this isn't normal, and I was shivering, but I wasn't really bad right away. I got in line. There was a huge line to get the finisher bags because I was like, okay, I got to get out of these wet clothes and get some clean clothes. Like, I'm in survival mode essentially. And so I got my bag. The dressing areas were like packed wall to wall with people, so there was like no hope of getting in there. So I was gonna walk back and try to find my mom in the family meeting area. And I saw a little nook somewhere, like a loading dock that had a little roof over it. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go over there and get some of this clothes off me. So I got my wet top layers off, got dry clothes on, put one coat on, and put my raincoat, my windbreaker over the top of that. So I had a sweater, I had a winter coat, and a windbreaker over the top of that. And I was still shivering really bad. I called my mom on the phone afterwards, and I said, "Are you out here?" Because I had told her, "Don't go out in this for me, for my sake. You don't have to feel like you have to." So I wasn't sure if she was going to be out there or not. I thought she might have stayed back at the hotel, but she was out there, and I was really glad because I was in bad enough shape that I was like, I don't feel really good about trying to walk 2 miles alone back to the hotel. That's really how bad I felt. So luckily she was there. We met up, and she was like, "Should we stop and get some coffee somewhere?" And I was just like, I just kind of want to keep walking. I was like, if I stop moving, I'm kind of worried that I'm gonna just get colder. So we kept moving, we kept walking, and eventually I started normalizing. Basically, I started heating up. My internal temperature got normalized, and I was like, okay, I feel a lot better now. I'm gonna be fine. But yeah, so that was a little bit scary. I had experience a little close to that, but it wasn't as bad as this one where I had the breathing and everything. So that was a little scary, but I was okay. I went back to the hotel, took a long shower, and then the rest of the week, I have a lot of family history out there, so I went out and did a bunch of sightseeing in Salem. I went out to Springfield, Massachusetts, and then we came back the last day back to Boston, and we did the Freedom Trail and did a lot of sightseeing in Boston itself. So that was, everything else was pretty much great. Of course, like that whole week, the running weather would have been perfect. The next day was like tailwind, ideal running conditions. So, just to rub it in that, if the race had been on Tuesday instead of Monday, it would have been like PR, So that was a little hard to take, but my first run after the race, my quads were definitely still in bad shape. So I definitely did hurt my quads, which was interesting because I should have been in really good shape. So I really think what it was is running into that headwind. I was a little over aggressive on the downhills, even though I was holding back. So that was a lesson learned, I think, definitely for next year, to go out even a little more cautiously right at the start. But I've run downhill races before, and so I thought I knew good enough, thought I knew how to handle that, but I do think that did some damage to my quads. I'm getting back to normal now, but yeah, I think that's about all I have to say about Boston Marathon. I got my medal here in a place of honor right in the middle, my rack here. My next race is going to be a half marathon. I'm doing the Bayshore about 5 weeks from now. That's going to be interesting. I don't know how recovered I'm going to be. I don't know how much my training is going to carry over, so I don't know really what to expect for that. I would love psychologically to set a half marathon PR and get that confidence build up again. So we'll see what happens there. And then I have the Marathon de Mont Blanc coming up on July 1st. For my next marathon, well, my next real marathon, I'm not going to be trying to PR the Marathon de Mont Blanc. I'm going to be running the Marquette Marathon in Marquette, Michigan in September, and I'm going to hopefully get my BQ there, and then I can decide whether or not I want to run Boston again next year. I should be, the kind of cool thing is, depending on how this training cycle goes, I might even be able to shoot for a sub-3 at Marquette. I'm not thinking about that yet, but my recent race times were kind of pointing towards that as a realistic possibility. I ran a 127.5, so I'm getting in kind of the low 3 territory, and if I can make progress like that through another training cycle, if I can get down to close to a 125.5 pace, I can start thinking about a three-hour marathon, which would be a lifetime, accomplishment for me. It'd be something I never really would have dreamed of. So that's kind of my next big goal after running Boston, to see if I can get a sub-3 before I get too old. So that's what I'm going to shoot for. I'm probably shooting for running Boston again. I'd love to get a number 1 overall in some little race. We'll see whether that happens or not. I've come close so many times, but that hasn't happened yet. But and then probably take some Masters titles. I've won one already, so now I'm a Masters runner, which is hard to believe. But But yeah, so that's pretty much all I have to say. I just wanted to kind of share that epic experience. Hopefully you've seen some of the photos, read some of the articles about the condition. Like 60% of the elites dropped out. That speaks for itself. I can say I beat Galen Rupp in a marathon because he DNF'd. So there are those kind of cool things to be able to say. You know, tell my nephews that, hey, I beat an Olympian in the marathon, and yeah, so I'm still kind of processing the experience, just being honest. I'm disappointed, but I'm not heartbroken, I would say. And I'm definitely, you know, looking forward to my next race. I told people at work today if I could run, psychologically I want to run a marathon this upcoming weekend, but I know that isn't the smart thing to do, and I know that wouldn't end well. But you know, being a competitive person, you're like, I can do better than that. I'm better than that. I should have done this. I could have done that. So I'm definitely going to be working hard to prove myself once again. So thanks for listening to my rant on that. Subscribe if you like the content. I've been growing and growing like crazy lately. So that's been great. And I will be back soon with more race previews, reviews, and gear reviews and all that good stuff. So thanks again.